Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics, and you're watching my weekly show, Histrionics, where every week we tackle women's issues from a centrist point of view. It is no secret that men in the U.S. are struggling, not least of which when it comes to finding a mate. And while oftentimes this gets turned on women get attacked for being childless cat ladies and told they're going to die miserable and alone. According to a 2023 Pew Research Center, 63% of young men ages 18 to 29 in the U.S. are single, compared to only 34% of young women. In response to the plight of these young men, red pill grifters are encouraging men to explore passport broing, which is really just a more favorable sounding term for what we used to call getting a mail order bride.
You guys know that there's a trend encouraging men to all get passports and travel abroad.
Passport bros. Can you explain that to me again?
So, have you heard of passport bros?
What is a passport bro?
Okay, passport bros are men that are so fed up with Western women because we're all apparently so woke and so terrible and Western women don't want to be wives that they are now going to other countries to find wives.
These people's entire worldview hinges on a lot of bad faith, false, and kind of ironic premises. First and foremost, the narrative goes that Western women are too materialistic. They only care about a man's money and what he can provide. So the passport bro crowd say, instead of fooling with these women who are so materialistic and who only care about money and who only want to use you for your resources, that men should instead go to poorer countries to obtain women that will be desperate for their money and resources, not to mention their potential green card access. Secondly, they argue that Western women have become too masculine. They say they have educations, they have jobs, they have money to take care of themselves. And due to that, these women will no longer be submissive to them, nor do they want to wait on them hand and foot like a mommy. Shocker. So basically, because these men can no longer convince/force Western women to do unpaid labor for them since we have equality under the law, and since they cannot actually afford to pay for cooks and cleaners and assistants, they argue that men should go to impoverished third world countries to obtain slaves, wives, who will happily do the aforementioned unpaid labor for them. Again, in exchange for their resources and access to green cards. They also argued that in other cultures, ones where women have been more oppressed and not given full equality, ones where the cultures continue to undervalue women and not treat them as full individuals, that these cultures will provide a better landscape for them to find a wife in. Because these women will be easier to control and manipulate and be used to less independent. And lastly, these men operate under the belief that their sexual market value, as they call it, will improve overseas because they will be seen as exotic American foreigners. So today, we are finally going to tackle the episode that I have been promising you guys basically since I launched the series. We are going to talk about the ethics of passport bros. In an episode I have entitled Passport Bros Exposed, the dark reality behind their desperation. But before we dive into the subject matter today, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not yet, and make sure to ring the bell so that you never miss a new release from me. So before we fully get into the meat, I want to give you a visual illustration of what passport broing looks like in real life. Let's roll the clip.
Hi guys, if you want to find an attractive young Filipina for your wife or girlfriend like I did, I can give you some advice on that. Some years back I decided I want to find me a good Filipina woman, and I went online, we met online. I decided, that's a good way to screen women. You can go to the country and try and meet women, but it's better if you can meet a lot of women online and screen them. I used as a basic screen, for example, college degree. She, didn't quite have a college degree yet, but does now.
That video went pretty viral on Twitter a few months ago, and I think absolutely everybody who came across it was extremely uncomfortable. You cannot tell me that that woman looks like she is there of her own volition. Every time she starts to speak, he cuts her off or cuts the tape. I'm just waiting for her to hold up a hostage sign of some sort. This is entirely gross. And I really think as we dig into the mentality and ideology behind the push for men to passport bro, you're really going to see just how skeezy and unethical it really is. I actually find it quite shocking the number of men with their full face in their profile pictures who will come on the internet and loudly advertise that they are interested in pursuing this. It's like announcing you're a big fat loser, okay? First and foremost, if you cannot attract a spouse in a country of 330 million very diverse people, I promise you, you are the problem. I promise you that. Secondarily, I do want to acknowledge, because oftentimes when this comes up, there's always a chorus of people who say, that's not really what men are doing. That's just very online. And yes, I recognize that. Most of these men who come and write like passport bro, I'm just going to passport bro, Western women are done in the comments, they probably don't have passports. They probably never left the country. It is absolutely an extremely online fringe conversation that is meant to comfort disillusioned men who do not have many prospects and make them feel like they have options and some way of like getting back at the Western women who keep rejecting them. Statistics on international marriage actually show that a relative minority of Americans marry people from other countries. And while they don't actually break this down, obviously in that minority, most of the people who are marrying people from other countries are not doing it because they went and did like passport broing. They're just happening to meet people who are visiting here on visas. Maybe they're traveling or working internationally. It's happening organically. But I still think this conversation is well worth having and addressing the sleazy mentalities that undergird it. Because the concern I have when people say, oh, that's just a very online conversation, that's just something that's fringe. Sure, a lot of really seedy, bad ideas start off that way. Words have power. And it's important that we do address bad mentalities, even when they are small and still like a seedling, so that they do not grow and continue to take root in our society and in our culture and in our political system. So the first issue I want to bring up when it comes to guys who are either trying to go be passport bros or who are at least pushing this idea on other men is that there are a ton of consent issues when it comes to this discussion. Pursuing relationships with women when they are economically disadvantaged is unethical for several reasons, but particularly when the motivations and the dynamics involved are seeking to exploit power imbalances. I don't know why I have to explain that this is bad, right? I'm a libertarian. If you're in libertarian circles, you know that we often talk about consent or the non-aggression principle and basically say that free people are free to make decisions as they wish, even if we think they're gross or weird. And so oftentimes when we talk about this, people will say, well, the woman's consenting to it, she's opting into it, so there's no problem. And I simply do not agree. I think I would push back on that premise for the same reasons I would often push back on the notion that there's no issues with prostitution. Now, I, as a libertarian, do not think that prostitution should be criminalized, okay? I do not think that people should be penalized for pursuing these kinds of arrangements, particularly because when we do criminalize it, it's often the women who are typically the victims in these situations that end up getting the brunt of the stick. It's not the actual perpetrators. But just because something is legal does not make it ethical. And it's very worth noting that in both of these kinds of situations. Seeking out a relationship where the woman feels pressured to enter it due to financial necessity rather than genuine emotional or personal connection is sick. Normal, well-adjusted people want to be in relationships with women who are all in, not women who are basically having to make a choice to sell their bodies in order to get basic resources. And that's why me and many others have often said that passport broing is basically a legalized form of sex trafficking. And often, if you dig into some of the cases, you'll often find a lot of very similar dynamics. A lot of women opt in to prostitution and sexual arrangements that happen under sex trafficking too, but they are not truly free to act of their own volition and consent in these situations. And this is why we consider them predatory. It may be legal to go to another country and offer a poor woman who has few options and who may even be in danger in her home country an out. And she might readily accept that because perhaps being with you and sleeping with you is better than the destitution and destruction she's living in. But that doesn't mean that what you're doing is ethical. Not only is there a consent issue when it comes to this idea, though, I also think that there is an inherent abusive underbelly to it, because the freak men who do seek out these power imbalances are doing that for a reason. It's not just that they cannot attract other women in their countries, likely due to some kind of character deficiencies that they have. It's also because they want relationship dynamics where they can be in control and they can manipulate someone. And obviously, if they were to try to partner here in the US with women who have full equality, who have access to resources, they are not so able to control and manipulate them. Those women have a natural out. When they seek out these kinds of power imbalances, those women do not have the same opportunities to get out from underneath their thumb. And it's really hard to argue that the vast majority of these women would opt into the marriages with these men if they did have more economic security and freedom. Obviously, this can very quickly lead to abuse. Controlling and manipulation, these kinds of tactics are predecessors for other forms of abuse. And secondarily, many of these women, particularly if they are bringing them from their home countries to America, where they have no connections, they have no friends, they have no family, they often don't even understand the language, they are even further isolated and incapable of being able to break free and leave a bad situation. And I would say all of these reasons contribute to the larger problem in this very, very desperate plan, which is that there is a lack of real consent in situations that involve economic desperation, period. This would be clear as day in most other comparable situations we could point to. If you have a pimp who is dating a girl and starts manipulating her and controlling her and convincing her to prostitute herself, and then she goes out and starts doing it and he's taking some of her pay, but she's afraid he'll leave her if she doesn't do this, you could not say that that woman is fully capable of consenting in that situation. She is being controlled, she is being manipulated, she is not fully autonomous because she is being abused. I would suggest the very same dynamic can easily be at play in these kinds of relationships and dynamics. Ultimately, when you have situations where women must make choices based off economic desperation versus authentic desire, you have a blurred line between genuine consent and coercion. And it's not to say that every single relationship formed under this kind of pursuit ends up being abusive or coercive. I'm sure there are people who end up being happy in these arrangements, but the very nature, the premise for why these men are seeking them out, it does come down to the fact that they want to have the ability to have more control over these women, control that they cannot get, respect that they cannot get, submission that they cannot get from women who are on an equal playing field with them, and that's gross. I like this tweet from Allie. She said, passport bros are the male version of gold diggers. Instead of seeking out a man who's too old to have options and calling him a provider, you're seeking out a woman who's too poor to have options and calling her a traditional woman. Shortcuts get you efficiency, but not love. And I think it's worth considering the reasons that men seek out these sorts of dynamics in the first place. Why these men are so incapable of finding relationships that they want here in the US. Because their premise that all Western women are just girl bosses and don't want traditional lifestyles and don't want to be a mom does not hold up under the slightest scrutiny of the data. Clarkson Lawson said, we have a generation of red pill whiny men who blame societal problems on single women as if they are owed sex, property, and a wife. In reality, their weakness and emotional immaturity are unappealing to intelligent Western women. The passport bros seek women who will submit to them without question because they fear being seen for what they truly are, weak. Little do they know, women from other countries also see through them. They just use them as an opportunity to come to the greatest country on earth. And that actually is the long and short of it, okay? Men who have good character, men who are truly masculine, men who actually have leadership capabilities have zero problems finding a wife, period, much less someone who's willing to let them take the lead. Most women I know would love to sit back and let their husband lead. Okay, me included. I love when my husband takes the lead. It's an amazing feeling. You can do it all, but do you want to? Absolutely not. When you're with a man who actually has these traits, you can turn your brain off, you can hand him the work, you can trust his decisions, and that is an excellent feeling. But the problem is we are lacking in men like that in our society, and I am positive that the men in the passport bro crew are not among them. Instead, these men have really bad values. They want submission without actually having the ability to lead. They want a mom. They don't want to truly contribute to a household or to a relationship or even to parenting. Many of them are not keeping up with women financially or in their education. And instead of saying, you know what, maybe I need to work a little harder to be on the same level as the women that I would like to attract, instead, they want to pull women back down or go seek out women who cannot compete with them and therefore make them feel like a big man. And that's the thing about men. They really want to always feel up here above women. And instead of recognizing when they're not, they often will just seek out lower and lower women. And by lower and lower women, I mean women who have fewer and fewer options or have less to bring to the table themselves so that they can feel like the big, strong man versus doing the work to actually be the big, strong man. A lot of these guys also have a completely delulu, glorified, idealized version of the past, particularly the 1950s. They talk about the 1950s like all the time. And it is so evident that they have not only never read a history book, but also that everything they know comes from like a lifestyle magazine marketing ad from some old magazine decades old. They can't even recognize that what they are dreaming of is propaganda and spin from decades ago. The 50s were not a great place for men or women. Work was harder. You had a lower standard of living. Women were popping pills nonstop. It was not good. We have made very good progress, and equality has been very good for people who are willing to compete and who are willing to treat others as individuals. The people who are longing for the past are the people who don't want to do the work to be of merit now. They're the men that feel like they were told, because you're a man, you're going to innately be up here and be above women, and you're going to have all these things handed to you because that is how society had been structured for decades. And now that it's no longer structured that way and they actually have to make something of themselves, they don't want to do the work, which I just can't think of anything more beta than that. This is from a Twitter account called The Road Just Traveled. And she said, I don't think I've ever known a woman to say she's looking for barely legal men who have had no life experience because they don't want him damaged or with baggage. And I find that very telling. And she was responding to another tweet where a person said, a thought. A lot of men say that they look for girls 18 to 25 because they want to get to them before they're damaged goods and be the first and best she's ever had. The thought, men know that other men, including themselves, are damaging. Many just want to be the first to do the damage. And I think this is something that comes up in this whole conversation around passport bros, right? It's not just that they want women who are traditional or submissive. They often want women who are very young. They very openly say they want women who are virgins. Like, there is a very, very creepy sort of underbelly to this movement that has a lot more to do than with just typical gender stereotypes and roles. And it's so true. When have you ever heard a woman say that? If you want somebody to basically be a child for them to be your partner, that says volumes about you, about your mental state, your emotional capacity. It's honestly very, very creepy, and it really rubs up against a legal line that very much should be in place. It's just highly questionable behavior. And as a whole, I really think that it is predatory. Additionally, many of these men, it's very, very readily apparent, hate women. The reason they cannot find spouses or mates in the US is because women see through their misogyny very, very quickly and rightfully push them to the side. Like I said, the passport bro mentality is informed by a lot of false and bad notions, many of which I have debunked on this show. But I think chief among them is that Western women are just after men's money, when in reality, most women are working, are doing pretty well in the workforce, and don't really need a man for his resources. They are the ones that are actually going and looking for those kinds of women when they say they're going to go passport bro. In the US, what women are looking for is leadership, drive, and ambition, which, yes, does often lead to financial success, but it's those traits, those masculine traits that they're actually interested in. And that's the masculine traits these men are not embodying when they refuse to compete and improve upon themselves in order to be desirable. Women are starved. I've said this over and over on the show. Women are starved. Our society is starved for true masculinity. True masculinity is embodied by traits like humility and intelligence, wisdom, servanthood, taking care of the people who are under your house and in your community. It's marked by protectiveness and kindness. And men who have these traits, they are not struggling, okay? They are not in the comments threatening to go passport bro. Those men are getting scooped up like that. And furthermore, when those traits are present, there are still tons of women in the US who are very interested in traditional gender roles, being stay-at-home moms, and even being able to submit to their husbands. I've seen this firsthand. I've talked about this over and over. I've grown up in church. My dad's a pastor. I was told throughout my 20s, just go to church, look for a man, look for that kind of leadership, look for that kind of character there. I'm telling you, the church pews are empty of young single men. Women are there in droves. And women are all over society and other places, volunteering, participating in community sporting leagues or other hobbies. They are putting themselves out there. The men are not showing up. They're in their homes bitching about women online. On Twitter, Emily May said, do women have unrealistic expectations, or do they just want men who are as thoughtful, helpful, attentive, and communicative as they are? Another person by the name of Honey on Twitter said, there are more marriageable women than there are men. Right now, as we speak, thousands of beautiful, kind, intelligent women are wasting away because they'd rather be alone than deal with this pathetic pool of options. Absolute tragedy. And I stand by that. I've said this for a while. Even just anecdotally, coming up in my 20s and 30s, the number of women I knew who were like great matches, who I would readily have set up with any good man around me, was in the dozens. Okay, beautiful, attractive women, well-kept women, women who worked out, women who had their education, women who had a good job, who were taking care of themselves, paying their bills, being responsible citizens, women who were often volunteering, women who were pursuing other hobbies and interests that they had, well-rounded women, women who had gone to see a therapist when they needed to, Jesus Christ. And the amount of men that I knew that I could say those exact same things about was like 2. Literally 2. I am very, very here for a honest conversation about what is failing men in society right now, because it is so obvious that things are going wrong. But what we continue to do instead is to try to tear women down, to tell them that they're being too picky, that they need to lower their standards, that something's wrong with Western women. No, something's wrong with Western men, okay? And not all of them, obviously, but the men who fall into these kinds of camps and ideologies, something has broken down and it needs to be addressed. And continuing to malign women and try to tear them down is not going to fix it. Emily May also said, I've seen people say, I know the sweetest Christian girl who still lives with her parents and is so submissive and she can't find a husband. And the thing is, most men looking for a submissive wife don't want a woman who is already submissive. They want to make her submit. And I said this in the Boss Babes episode. That's the whole reason that they are fixated on Boss Babes. They're obsessed with them because they want them. They want the women up here. They want them so badly, and they are furious that they cannot get their attention. And so instead of working to move up themselves and be worthy of those kinds of women, instead they constantly seek to tear them down, or they resort to going and finding women that they can keep under their thumb. And furthermore, even the women who are here, who are more of the traditional submissive mindset, they're not checking for these men either, okay? The Boss Babes don't want them, but neither do like the virtuous, quiet, submissive women they love to caricature. Those women are also looking for other virtuous, stand-up men of character. They are often in the churches and they are marrying people that are in their same value system, in their same circles, and they're typically marrying quite young. The irony in all of this, though, that I just cannot get past is for the passport bros to constantly accuse Western women of gold digging, when in reality, most of them have no gold to offer Western women. They can't even afford to like have a stay-at-home wife, much less do they have like excess resources for the woman to live off of or to like take from them in case of a divorce. So if they divorce, they're probably just kind of like split the debt, if anything. But they continue to harp on and on and on about Western women trying to use them for the resources that are non-existent here. And yet their plan is to go overseas and seek out women who will specifically only be interested in them because their money is worth more over there and because they have access to a better country. And I think it's really interesting if you actually start digging into the data on the countries these men are going to. Because while we don't have perfect research on it, as much as we can gather, the areas that they are targeting are places that are already known for having very, very bad conditions for women. We've seen a huge influx on men who have targeted a lot of Eastern Europe, particularly Ukraine and Russia. Yes, they're targeting war zones. And again, what woman is not going to take an out of a war zone when all the men around her are dropping dead and her life is in danger? They're going to places like Thailand, which is notorious for having horrific prostitution and sex trafficking issues, particularly with younger girls. They are intentionally seeking out countries and women where they know their options are limited, where they know that even though their resources ain't much here, that they are a lifeline to women there. So ultimately, these men are actually fine with being used for their money. It's just that they don't have enough money to get the attention of women here. And that's like the biggest hypocritical stance of all time. As I've said over and over, men who actually have gold, men who actually have wealth are not worried about being used for it. In fact, they like it. And the fact that these men go on and on about gold diggers, they actually have no problem with women using men for their money and resources. They're just mad that what they have in this country isn't keeping up with what women have. They are intentionally seeking out women who will use them just to have lower standards due to their economic circumstances. And listen, I care about this issue because as an individualist, as a humanist, as a feminist, I care about the plight of other women, particularly women who were not fortunate enough to be born in this country like I was, or even into countries where women have equal rights. I don't know how much you guys have been paying attention over the past couple of weeks with what's happening to women in the Middle East, but it is horrifying. It is tragic. And I cannot sit by and be okay with other women being forced into these kinds of calculations and situations. And it disgusts me that there are men in my own country who would take advantage of that. But while I do think many women in these foreign countries are being victimized and preyed upon by these passport bros, the good news is the passport bros are not faring so well themselves. These men are often leaving a path of destruction in their wake. Number one, I want to point out ad nauseum that this is not something most men are doing. But of the small population that is doing it, I would say even a smaller population is actually marrying women and bringing them back here. What they're mostly doing is going over and trying to have like hookups with women overseas. And it has left a wave of destruction in their wake. This is according to ABC News, but they say men from overseas, including Australia, are estimated to have fathered tens of thousands of children to sex workers in the Philippines. Now, thanks to DNA, the children are tracking them down. And they have this video. We'll insert it here. But basically, they're talking about how they're creating kids, they're abandoning them, they're leaving women as single moms in these countries with now even more kids to take care of, and they're piecing out.
Find out where they came from. In a trailblazing project, their DNA is being used to hunt down their missing dads.
And because of that, the men in some of these countries are starting to fight back.
32 passport bros have been found dead in Colombia between January 2023 and October 2023. And that's just in the city of Medellin alone. The number of thefts committed against these foreigners has also increased 200% in the third trimester of 2023. And I don't have a problem with people trying to find love. I do, however, have a problem with men traveling to poorer countries to take advantage of their women. And it seems that the Colombian government and gangs have a problem with this as well. Quoting the mayor of Medellin, anyone who thinks they can come here for and tourism, we don't want any of that here. What's not bragged about as much in the passport bro community is that many times these gangs are actually forcing underage girls to sign up for dating profiles to lure these guys in. So these Colombian men are really just Chris Hansening these guys, except with much more serious consequences. So to the passport bros traveling to other countries to have sex with children, or the ones that are just traveling to take advantage of these women, know that those actions are now coming with consequences. And realize that these women are human beings who want to be loved and taken care of and not just treated as submissive slaves. And to the passport bros gonna come at me saying that's not the point of passport bros, how many of you have come home with wives? We all know it's just a cheeky name for tourism.
Not only have there been strings of men actually disappearing when they go and pursue some of this in other countries, they also are often finding out that the women they are targeting don't have such low standards as they hoped.
Normally and typically in an Arab household, the man usually is the provider financially, and that's just how it is.
That is just something I wasn't prepared for.
Most Arab women expect that.
Just like most American people expect the woman to contribute half. Or not half, just contribute.
But you're not dealing with an American woman.
No, but she'd have to deal with some of my things, though, too. This was definitely not what I wanted to hear. I thought Moroccan women prioritize family over material things, and I was not anticipating that it would mean I have to be the sole provider for a household. I didn't sign up for this.
And not only are they often finding that the women overseas actually have higher expectations for men to be providers than they do here in the States, expectations that they can in no way, shape, or form meet. They're also finding out the hard way that many of them have ulterior motives.
Holy moly, a warning to all the guys out there who call themselves passport bros. Let me share a true story with you. I am currently working with a male client in his 50s. He went to a South American country and found himself who he thought was going to be the perfect traditional woman, 20 years younger. Woo! So it happens. She love bombs him. She treats him like her king, her papi. And she's cooking for him and cleaning for him, and it's romance, and the sex is amazing. And this man is like everything he wanted in a woman. She was it. Until he brought her back to the States, got her green card. She moved into his beautiful, beautiful condo and thought she can run game, dumped him, and met a multimillionaire and broke his heart. The end.
That's right. You can go all over TikTok. I actually love this as a deep dive and hear stories of these men getting robbed by women, getting drugged by them, even bringing them back to the US, being abandoned by them. Like, the list goes on and on. At the end of the day, passport bros do not hurt Western women. Western women are not checking for them at all in the first place. The Echo 13 on Twitter said, complaining about women on the internet will not get you married. Women don't read these posts and think, oh, he's right, I should change. They read them and think, this man is unattractive. Women do not care if you don't get married. Women do not care if you don't find a girlfriend. Women do not care if you are not desirable. They just won't date you. They will forget all about you the second they scroll past your post. You're not doing anything except putting yourself at even more of a disadvantage than you already were and encouraging other men to disadvantage themselves too. All you do when you post about modern women and how much of an inconvenience they are is tell all of the women who read it that you are not desirable. You're not inspiring change. You're not offering insider education. You're not making yourself look attractive. You are just cementing yourself in your undesirable box while women continue looking elsewhere. So yeah, you're not going to hurt my feelings. You're not going to hurt the feelings of other women in America. Like, they really aren't worried about losing access to you. What they are worried about is vulnerable women in other countries who might get stuck with really low-grade men, and in often very abusive situations where consent is not actually fully present. Ultimately, the mentalities and ideologies of the passport bro movement are dehumanizing, they're gross, and they're misogynistic, and they're predatory. Equality is a good thing. Equal relationships are a good thing. Reducing women in third world countries to stereotypes and then preying on them due to their perceived lack of options and opportunities makes you a bad person. Men who are in this camp or who are getting indoctrinated into it need to stop and ask themselves a few hard questions. One, why do you need your female partner to be beneath you? Why do you need somebody to submit to you? If you were actually strong, you would not need a weaker person to feel better next to. Secondarily, these men need to be asking themselves what they can do to actually make themselves more attractive to women who would choose you no matter what their financial circumstances are. That's what you should want in a relationship. And thirdly, they really should be asking themselves why they don't want relationships built on mutual respect and value. Because I think there are a lot of deeply unhealed and problematic things underlying that desire. Obviously, if becoming a real man of value were easy, everyone would do it. But the reward for doing that is far better than opting into these situations where you're basically resorting to legalized sex trafficking just for company. All right, guys, that's a wrap for this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not yet, and if you want even more content from me, you can check me out on Instagram and TikTok. If you like this episode, don't forget to check out others in my series, Histrionics, here, and you can watch my other weekly show, the Base Politics Podcast, here.